Madam Speaker, I support. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Honorable Leader of Majority. Honorable Bui, I hadn't seen your cards, but you'll go next.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And I rise to support these regulations, approve of these regulations. Honorable Speaker, it's indeed true, as the chair of the Delegated Legislation Committee has said and as seconded by the Vice Chair of the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee, who is a seasoned officer in the military. And I keep telling him, Honorable Speaker, that unlike in the military, here in this house, there are rules other than the standing orders that they had in the military. And I am happy that the Vice Chair is now accustomed to operations of the House. The last Parliament, he had difficulty settling down in the House as opposed to what he was used in the military. But Honorable Speaker, the Vice Chair will tell you that indeed, it is indeed true that over time, our country has been losing its premier status in the region as one of the countries that contribute immensely to the United Nations and other regional forces, even those for the AU. Because one, we have very good and disciplined officers in our army. But the equipment with which they work with, some of the equipment may not be as good as it ought to be. Some were acquired when Major Bashir was still in the army. And you can imagine now that he has been out of the army for this long, and they are still using the same equipment that Major Bashir used when he was in the army, and also the Honorable Raso. Honorable Speaker, it then becomes important because when our officers, our very disciplined and good officers serve, either in the UN or other regional forces, like those that are serving in Somalia, those that are serving in DRC, Congo, we, in a way, also benefit as a country because if you are serving in the UN also gives money to pay for equipment, to pay for the officers' allowances when they are there. And you know, many officers who are serving in our military occasionally lobby very aggressively to serve in these units that are serving outside the country because it also becomes beneficial for them. And therefore, when the country loses such opportunities on account of us not having modern equipment, you have vehicles that are rickety and a little bit older than they ought to be, and also you don't have continuous training and capacity building for officers, then we also lose as a country. It's also important, Honorable Speaker, to have a separate fund for this money. Because whenever money is contributed, for instance, from the UN and it goes into the consolidated fund, and it finds members of parliament demanding for CDF disbursement, or gracious ladies, women reps demanding for their GAF money, or even governors, Honorable Speaker, demanding for money to be disbursed to the constituencies, to their counties, or even, Honorable Speaker, that money comes at a time when public debt is up or due for payment. Then, and that money is in a consolidated fund, there is no way of distinguishing or creating a distinction between what money ought to go to the peacekeeping missions or that which should go to debt repayment. And you may find that this money may get into one pot in the consolidated fund and end up paying part of our debt. Others goes towards the settlement of other national obligations, and leaving then our military officers in the state that I have just mentioned to operate with equipment that is almost obsolete. We leave them in a state where they are not doing capacity building. And basically, Honorable Speaker, you know, when our young men and women serving us in the military are out there in the bush, fighting to restore peace in the areas where they have been given work to restore peace, Honorable Speaker, they serve under very strenuous and difficult conditions and in an environment where we should not be putting them under any strain or stress, even for their families back home. Honorable Speaker, it's therefore important to have these funds in a separate fund where, one, we can ensure that they are able to access this money as fast as they need it, if it is to buy equipment, if they need money to equip the officers, if they need money to feed the officers out in the field, they have readily available cash. And therefore, it's important to have a separate fund, and I do support the establishment of this fund, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, in conclusion, we Honorable Speaker, we have served, or rather our military has served in very many jurisdictions, from Bosnia to Somalia, and now in the region in DRC, Congo, and still a good number of them still in Somalia. And we are in a region, Honorable Speaker, where today our neighbors in the Sudan have problems. Honorable Speaker, as neighbors and as African brothers, we have a duty and a responsibility as neighbors to our neighboring countries to ensure there is peace in those countries, Honorable Speaker. And I would really appeal to the warring factions in the Sudan. We may not need to strain our regional forces, looking for forces to go and bring about peace, because it is all about politics in the Sudan, and I really appeal to the generals fighting there to consider the plight of millions of the Sudanese people who today are suffering, some are dying, and we've seen reports in the media with bodies all over the streets of Khartoum. Honorable Speaker, with those many remarks, because I see time is over, may I support as I plead with our generals in our neighboring countries to maintain peace, so that we do not also have to strain our forces to send them to other countries besides the countries that they're already in. With those many remarks, I support.
The Honorable Junet Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand